Hi there. Welcome. Hope you are doing well. At the start, we see a drone flies over a small village in Afghanistan, drawing the attention of the locals, who immediately prepare to attack. Soon, a horde of American soldiers arrive and find the town empty as everyone hides inside. The team continues moving, and when they find a suspicious man carrying a bomb, they immediately surround him and threaten to shoot him if he does not drop his weapon. At first, the man tries to ignore the threat, but when he sees that the soldiers are serious, he pulls out a gun, forcing the soldiers to kill him on the spot with several shots. Jake then tells Colonel Mason about the dead man and the bomb, and asks for permission to defuse it. Mason refuses, but Jake ignores him and goes ahead anyway, successfully defuses it. At that moment, a second secret bomb explodes, killing most of the soldiers. The men quickly emerge from the buildings and surround the Americans as they open fire, and a fierce firefight ensues. The American soldiers are being shot everywhere, with only Jake and Mason left alive. Jake runs to join his colonel and is almost shot by the enemy, but Mason saves his life before a helicopter arrives. 5 years later, Jake is trying his best to deal with a new life as a civilian while taking medication for his PTSD. His new job is at an auto shop owned by Earl, where he has to work harder to deal with some overbearing customers. After work, Jake returns home to spend time with his family. He always makes sure to keep his son in a happy mood, but in private, things get tense when his wife points out that they have a lot of unpaid bills. However, Jake promises to take care of her as he always has. When Jake puts his son to bed, he shares a photo and a story about his old band and the fact that Mason was in the hospital when the baby was born. Jake laments not having spoken to Mason in a while, and when the boy asks if he has ever killed anyone, Jake dodges the question. The next day, Jake goes to work and finds a group of gangsters claiming that Earl owes them money. When Jake tries to drive them out, Chief Fresh sends his men to beat him up, but Jake easily defeats them all with a wrench. Fresh gets him to stop by showing him his gun, then leaves with his gang after promising a second round in the future. Jake then confronts Earl, who admits that he was part of a gang too, but was lucky enough to leave that life behind and build something he can call home. Earl promises that he will always protect his territory, so Jake doesn't need to worry about his family. Jake feels like he is still at war and calls his family to check on them, hearing his wife say that he should have called the police instead of intervening. Later that evening, Jake drives home and sees Fresh in his car mentioning revenge before driving away. A panicked Jake runs into the house and is shocked to discover that his family is dead, screaming and crying as he completely breaks down. Moments later, the police arrive and try to ask him some questions, but Jake breaks down and drives away in his truck. He drives through town in search of Fresh's car, while his mind remains occupied with memories of his happy family. Eventually, he finds the car outside a punk club, so Jake rushes inside with a gun in his hand and starts shooting every single member of the gang without hesitation. When he is about to kill Fresh, the man explains that he didn't mean to kill Jake's family but had no choice. This doesn't change Jake's mind and he shoots Fresh as well. 5 months later, Jake is serving time in prison for his crime, and his PTSD worsens as he spends most of his day imagining Fresh killing his family. One day, Jake is surprised by a visit from Mason, who offers to help him reopen the case. Jake refuses because he believes he belongs here and repeats what he told the judge. He got his revenge and has no regrets now. In fact, he would do it again. Jake then tells Mason never to come back and tells the guard to send him back to his cell. That night, Jake reminisces about his days in the military and how Mason retired after saving his life. A while later, Jake is visited by a stranger named Ramsey, who mentions that he runs a special task force. But Jake doesn't let him say more and again asks the guard to return him. Later that evening, Jake dreams about his family when suddenly, a group of masked men burst into his cell and drug him before kidnapping him. When Jake wakes up later, he finds himself outside the prison and discovers that his kidnapper is Ramsey, who admits that he has been watching Jake for a long time and is impressed by his record. Ramsey's organization, called Section 8, doesn't play by the rules, and Ramsey believes that they can get Jake back on target. As a final touch, Ramsey says that Jake's son wants to see him as a hero and not a convict, so Jake finally agrees to join. Later in Washington, D.C., Ramsey introduces Jake to the rest of the team: Elias, Ajax, Broner, and Mueller. He then gives him a tour of what he calls the Batcave while explaining that they have 8 agents in Washington and 8 elsewhere in the world. Their orders come from the State Department and the National Security Agency, which always deal with threats to national security. Since Jake is just starting out, Mueller will be his lookout and go with him on all missions so he can gain seniority. Jake will also be given a bank account, an apartment in the city, a vehicle, a backstory, and an alias since he is dead to the world. Ramsey then has to leave, so the team has to put Jake through the initiation process. Ajax starts to provoke him, pushing him and throwing some punches at him. Jake refuses to fight and does his best to avoid them all, but Ajax becomes so aggressive that he makes Jake collapse. He pushes Ajax to the ground and almost stabs him in the eye with a pen, but suddenly a memory of his family flashes through his mind and he calms down. Jake then leaves, and a frustrated Ajax points out that Jake showed fear, and that means he doesn't belong with them, but Mueller disagrees. After a while, Jake and Mueller board a plane and discuss Jake's first mission. The target is a man named Castillo, a defense contractor who also works as an arms dealer. He recently got his hands on some dangerous blueprints that he's going to sell to the Russians, so Jake's mission is to recover the blueprints and kill Castillo and his men. Jake realizes that they are basically a group of assassins, and he's not looking to kill again. That evening, the duo arrives in Mexico, where they find Castillo about to make an exchange with a Russian negotiator in a warehouse. While Castillo and the Russian argue, Jake sneaks in and discreetly kills a guard. The noise makes both gangs think the other is out to get them, so their argument quickly escalates into a gunfight. The gang members begin to die one by one, and even cause a car to explode, causing the fighting to finally stop. Jake then goes outside and kills all the survivors before looking inside the car, where two very scared women are. Jake ignores them and grabs the blueprints before leaving. Later at the base, Ramsey berates Jake for compromising the integrity of their mission by leaving the women alive. Jake tries to explain that they are victims and accuses Ramsey of disregarding human life, so Ramsey threatens to send him back to prison if he does not obey. Jake is then fired, and Mueller tells Ramsey that Jake did a good job, but Ramsey is still hesitant, so Ajax intervenes and points out that Ramsey made a mistake. Once left alone, Ramsey contacts someone named Luke. The next day in Nevada, the mercenary Locke breaks into a hotel and kills some of the employees before entering a room, where he scares the women before confronting his victim. The man learns that Locke was sent by Ramsey and attempts to bribe him with a large sum of money, but Locke kills him anyway. Locke then flees through the hotel's casino, but the guards immediately suspect him and pursue him. Locke easily knocks out every guard who approaches and begins running, breaking things along the way and knocking out the guards who keep coming. Eventually, he pulls out his gun and fires off a few bullets just to cause panic in the gambling crowd, and also kills a guard before getting out and stealing a car to get away. Meanwhile, Jake moves into the new house and is shocked to find a frame with a collection of photos from his time in Afghanistan. This reminds him of a conversation he had with Mason, during which Jake blamed himself for his injury, and Mason made sure to comfort him. Later, Jake is drinking at a bar and Mueller joins him, so Jake tries to get some information from her. Mueller doesn't know anything about Ramsey, but explains that she was in the military and beat up a commanding officer who scolded her. After a while, Ramsey gives them their new mission. They must retrieve vaulted digital information on a sensitive issue and kill Senator Graham, who is a traitor to the country and has paid off many people to stay free. Security will be extremely tight, so Ramsey reminds everyone, especially Jake, that they must fight back. A few hours later, the group arrives at Graham's event in California disguised as park workers. Mueller sneaks in to kill all the guards she can find, and eventually security learns of the situation and takes Graham away in a van. While Mueller hacks into the senator's computer, Jake chases Graham, firing a few shots to no avail. The van is too fast for him, so Jake takes a shortcut by jumping over a hill and manages to block the road. One of the guards tries to fight him off, but Jake quickly kills him before he can get close to Graham, who begs for his life saying he has a family. Suddenly, Jake is flooded with memories and decides to let Graham live. However, the team shows up and kills Ajax Graham before reminding Jake not to hesitate. Later at home, Jake struggles with his guilt and cries while looking at pictures and drinking. Suddenly, he sees masked men running outside his window, so he hides before they enter his house. The men search every room for him, but Jake manages to escape through the back door. The next day, Jake goes to see Mason and tells him the whole story. Mason mentions that he knew that the real Section 8 was dismantled in the 90s and that the section that is now operational is just a swamp of disgraced agents from the military, CIA, FBI, and so on. They even have important connections in Washington, so if Jake escapes Section 8, he is in grave danger. Mason has never heard of Ramsey and promises to make some calls. He also agrees to help Jake with some money and a gun. Jake then returns to his hometown and gets a call from Ramsey, who wants to meet him to talk things out, but Jake refuses. Ramsey then asks Mueller to contact Luke, who is currently hiding out in Argentina, to give him the mission to kill Jake. Sometime later, Jake meets his son's best friend, and as they talk about the tragedy, he learns that before his family was killed, Fresh was seen with people in black suits like the secret agents seen in the comics. Before he can get any more information, Luke shows up and opens fire, so Jake pushes the kid into a store before escaping. Panic ensues as Luke kills a few civilians, and soon the police arrive, only to be shot by Luke as well. This distraction allows Jake to escape, so Luke steals a police car and goes looking for him while he calls Ramsey to tell him what happened. That evening, Jake hides in Earl's store, remembering how Earl raised him after his parents died. Suddenly, the computer starts beeping to announce the team's arrival, so Jake and Earl grab some weapons to fight them off. Jake is nearly shot by Elias, but Earl quickly takes him down. Bruner then jumps on Jake and they begin fighting on top of a car, when suddenly, Ajax opens fire on them. Bruner turns to scream at his carelessness, and Jake takes the opportunity to stab him with a screwdriver. When Ajax opens fire again, Jake uses the corpse as a shield and retrieves his gun to start firing, but he quickly runs out of bullets. Ajax has a few left, but he wastes them on purpose because he wants to fight Jake face to face again to prove he's better. The men begin exchanging blows throughout the store and Ajax tries to stab Jake, but ends up getting shot by Mueller. Jake then checks on Earl, who is fine, and gives Jake his car key so he can escape because the police are coming. Later in the car, Mueller says she saved Jake because she also wants to leave Section 8. Jake doesn't think he can trust her and demands that he be taken to wherever Ramsey is staying. The next day, the duo arrives in Montana and tries to sneak through the woods to find Ramsey's cabin, but when Jake turns around, he suddenly faints. After dreaming about his family again, Jake wakes up tied to a chair in a room with Ramsey and Mueller, who was working for Ramsey to set this trap for Jake. Ramsey says he has a surprise and Jake is shocked to see Mason walk into the room, learning that he was working for Ramsey as well. The organization needed an agent with Jake's skills, so Mason tells them how to get to him. This means that they are the ones who paid to kill his family. Jake can't believe Mason betrayed him, but Mason just says Jake was wasting his talent on cars and a baby. Afterwards, the group leaves Jake alone and Mason pays Ramsey and Mueller the money they agreed upon. Ramsey says they should kill Jake because he is a liability and Mason agrees but looks inward. While Mueller counts the money, Mason goes to see Jake and frees him before admitting the truth. He was hired to take down Section 8 from the inside, and now Jake wants his help in finishing the job. Mason then intentionally sets off the alarm, and when two guards come to check, they quickly kill them. More men continue to arrive and the duo shoots them all as they head off to find Ramsey. Another shootout ensues as bullets wreak havoc on their surroundings, and when Ramsey sees them, he hides with Mueller and offers Jake money in exchange for Mason. Jake refuses to shoot, so Ramsey then tries to convince Jake that this is all Mason's fault, but Jake doesn't believe him. While they argue, Mueller sneaks up and tries to shoot Jake, but Mason tells him to move and takes the bullet instead. Mueller falls and returns. Jake runs to check on his friend and Ramsey tries to grab the money, but Jake scares him off with several shots. Mason then orders Jake to finish the job and dies. At that moment, Mueller steps in and tries to shoot Jake, but she runs out of ammo so they start a fist fight instead. After exchanging a few blows, Mason stabs Jake in the shoulder, but he uses the opportunity to turn her hand against her and kills her. Jake then gets out and sees Ramsey escaping in a car, so he steals a car and chases after him. The two men open fire as they drive madly, and Ramsey gets so distracted that he ends up crashing. Jake walks to the wreckage, and when Ramsey insults him for his hesitation, Jake finally kills him. That evening, the police bring Jake to meet General Savoy, for whom Mason used to work. Savoy offers Jake a job and a clean slate if he accepts to join his team, but Jake declines the offer saying he has nothing to fight for. Just in case, Savoy gives him his card anyway. Later, Jake returns home only to find Luke waiting for him, as he still wants to finish his job as his reputation demands. A fistfight soon ensues and both men show off their amazing fighting skills while also using any object or furniture in the room to attack. When the fight moves to the kitchen, they each grab a knife and continue to beat each other up until Luke throws Jake to the floor. This allows Jake to retrieve his gun and finally kill Luke. The next morning, Jake sends a voice message to Earl, thanking him for everything and announcing that he is leaving. Meanwhile, Jake is riding a bus and sees a mother having a sweet moment with her son. Memories of his family flood back into his mind, and Jake calls Savoy to accept his offer, saying that he has something he wants to fight for. Thanks for watching.